Black man was kicked off the plane for smelling, but then everyone apologized. Marcus Williams stepped onto the bustling airport terminal with calm determination, dressed in a simple navy jacket, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The hum of travelers rushing past filled the air, but Marcus moved steadily toward his gate, clutching a worn leather briefcase that hinted at long days on the road. Despite the casual attire, there was an unmistakable air of quiet confidence about him. As he approached the boarding gate for Flight 342, a stern-faced gate agent named Olivia, known for her strict enforcement of rules, glanced sharply at Marcus. Her eyes narrowed subtly, her lips tightening into a thin line. Without a word, she leaned in close and whispered just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Are you sure you're fit to fly today? There have been complaints about an unpleasant odor." Her words, laced with judgment and thinly veiled suspicion, rippled through the waiting crowd. Heads turned, whispers spread, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. Marcus paused, surprised by the accusation, yet he maintained his composure, meeting Olivia's gaze steadily. What happened next stunned everyone watching, as a truth unfolded that would leave the entire terminal in silence, and eventually, deep regret. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. And if you love stories that reveal the unexpected, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more. Today, at Terminal 7 of the city's busiest airport, where travelers from all walks of life converge, Olivia was just doing her job. But little did she know, Marcus Williams was no ordinary passenger. The story about to unfold is one of unfair judgment, courage, and an unforgettable turnaround. Marcus Williams was a man in his early 30s, standing just over 6 feet tall with a lean, athletic build that suggested discipline and resilience. His skin was a rich shade of deep brown, and his eyes, calm yet piercing, held the quiet wisdom of someone who had faced hardship but refused to be defined by it. His hair, closely cropped, framed a face marked by subtle lines, traces of long days spent working hard and navigating life's challenges with unwavering resolve. He wore a simple navy jacket worn at the elbows over a plain white t-shirt. His jeans were faded and slightly frayed at the cuffs, paired with well-used sneakers that had clearly traveled many miles. In his hand, a leather briefcase, scuffed and softened from years of use, hinted at a story of steady effort and persistence. Marcus wasn't flashy or loud. He blended in quietly, yet there was something magnetic about his presence. Around him, the airport buzzed with the usual crowd. Business travelers in sharp suits, families loaded with luggage, tourists snapping photos. But Marcus carried an aura of grounded strength and dignity, a man who knew where he was going, despite the obstacles he faced. His identity wasn't tied to appearances or possessions. It was built on resilience, hard work, and the quiet dignity of a person who had learned to rise above judgment and prejudice. As Marcus made his way through the bustling airport terminal, he moved with calm purpose toward the boarding gate. His ticket in hand, he glanced briefly at the other passengers, some dressed in designer clothes, others absorbed in their phones or chatting loudly. Everything seemed ordinary, until a sharp glance from a nearby airline staff member caught his attention. A young flight attendant named Karen, dressed immaculately in her crisp uniform, noticed Marcus standing near the gate. Her smile, polite, but strained, didn't quite reach her eyes. She exchanged a quick look with a colleague, her expression flickering with a hint of judgment. Without any reason, she leaned slightly toward Marcus and asked, her voice low but tinged with suspicion, "Are you sure you're feeling all right? You smell a bit unusual." The words were subtle, almost casual, but loud enough for a few nearby passengers to overhear. Marcus froze for a moment, caught off guard by the implication behind her tone. He glanced down at his jacket, wondering if something was wrong. Around him, a few eyes shifted uncomfortably, and a ripple of quiet murmurs began to spread. Karen's body language remained cold and distant, as if she already assumed Marcus was out of place, an inconvenience rather than a valued passenger. No one else said anything, but the atmosphere had shifted. An invisible line was drawn, and Marcus suddenly found himself on the wrong side of it. Marcus tried to brush off the subtle jab, offering a polite smile as he replied, "I'm fine. Thank you." But Karen's eyes narrowed, her tone growing sharper. "Sir, it's company policy to ensure all passengers meet certain standards before boarding." Her words, carefully measured, carried a heavy undercurrent, one that hinted at more than just routine procedure. She stepped closer, whispering so only Marcus could hear. "If this continues, I might have to ask you to leave." The threat was clear, though unspoken aloud. Around them, a few other passengers began to stare, their expressions shifting from curiosity to discomfort. Whispers filled the air like an invisible wave, spreading judgment without direct confrontation. Marcus felt the weight of their eyes, the sting of assumptions that had nothing to do with him. He looked down, trying to steady his breathing, but the humiliation was growing. Despite his calm exterior, inside, frustration bubbled. Why was he being singled out? What had he done to deserve this? When Karen suddenly motioned to a security officer nearby, the tension snapped. The officer approached with a solemn face, and Marcus was asked to step aside. Murmurs swelled into whispers of disapproval, some confused, others clearly biased. Marcus's heart sank. The injustice wasn't just in the accusation, it was in how quickly the crowd accepted it without question. As Marcus was gently escorted away, the cabin fell into an uneasy silence. No one stepped forward to challenge the scene unfolding, and the seeds of misunderstanding and prejudice had taken root in the minds of those watching. Just as Marcus was about to be taken off the plane, a sharp voice cut through the tension. It was Lisa, a flight attendant who had been quietly observing everything from the sidelines. She stepped forward, holding up a small bottle of cologne. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "I just spoke with Mr. Marcus. The smell everyone is talking about, it's not him. It's from a leaking bottle in the overhead bin." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The security officer paused, confusion replacing his stern demeanor. Passengers who had been whispering judgment now turned their heads in disbelief. Karen's confident posture faltered as she realized her mistake. Then, to everyone's surprise, Marcus calmly reached into his carry-on and pulled out an envelope, handing it to the lead flight attendant. Inside was a letter of apology he had drafted for the airline, accompanied by a generous voucher for future flights, an act of grace despite the humiliation he had endured. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "We sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. Mr. Marcus is welcome to stay on board." Cheers and applause broke out from some passengers, while others looked down, embarrassed by their earlier assumptions. In that moment, the power shifted completely. Marcus, once the target of unfair treatment, stood tall, not just as a passenger, but as a symbol of dignity and justice restored. The very crowd that had judged him now witnessed the truth unfold, reminding everyone how quick society can be to judge without knowing the full story. As the plane settled and the initial shock began to fade, an unmistakable change swept through the cabin. Passengers who had whispered and pointed now lowered their voices, many exchanging looks of remorse and reflection. Conversations sparked around the real issue, how easy it is to jump to conclusions based on appearances and assumptions. Lisa, the flight attendant who had revealed the truth, addressed the passengers calmly. "This was a powerful reminder for all of us, to withhold judgment until we know the facts, and to treat everyone with respect, no matter what we think we see." Even Karen, the passenger who had first complained, quietly apologized to Marcus, her voice tinged with humility. Others nodded in agreement, some even approaching Marcus to express their regret personally. This collective awakening transformed the atmosphere. What began as a moment of division became a lesson in empathy, kindness, and the danger of prejudice. Marcus's calm dignity in the face of injustice inspired many to reconsider their own biases. By the time the flight resumed, the cabin was filled with a new sense of understanding. A silent vow among many to be more compassionate, more aware, and to remember that every person's story is deeper than a first impression. As the plane touched down and passengers gathered their belongings, the story of what happened aboard that flight lingered in the air, not just as an isolated incident, but as a reflection of a much larger truth. It reminded everyone watching that prejudice often hides in the smallest moments, in snap judgments and whispered assumptions. Marcus's experience showed us how quickly misunderstandings can escalate when fear and bias take control, and how powerful it is when courage and truth bring those falsehoods to light. It's a call to look beyond surface impressions and treat every person with dignity, no matter where they come from or what others might say. In a world that's too often divided by suspicion, this moment became a powerful example of empathy. Breaking through, a reminder that kindness and respect aren't just ideals, they're necessities if we want to build a better, more understanding society.